Spaicy Project's journey. Hi, I'm Louis Sid, born in 1990 Chile, and this is my story of how I created Spaicy Project. Since I was a little girl, I have always loved cartoons, video games, and everything that has animated characters. I always saw them on TV and I admired that. I wanted to create something like them. That's how during my childhood I decided myself in a self-taught way to draw, observing what I saw and trying to replicate it. That's how I was learning. At that time, back in the 2000s, there were not the same amount of tutorials and information as we had today on the internet, so learning was a little more difficult. Back then, in 1998, I had my dog, Pelusa, and I was always drawing her, creating adventures for her, inspired by Disney animated movies and other franchises. This character was mutating through the years, combining with other influences of the moment, such as my dog, 90s anime, furry, and Sonic. Probably some of you are surprised to not see Shantae on this list, but I knew about her several years after Spaicy was created. If you wonder where the names come from, it's a funny story. I was thinking a name for this character and I asked it to my sister, what could be she called? She said a few names like, I don't know, call her Kimberly, Susie, Spaicy or something like that. And I was like, wow, I like Spaicy! And that's how it said. During my childhood, I used to draw her adventures in a grid notebook, with other invented characters, putting them together with Sonic characters. At that time, I didn't know that this was called fan character. Yes, she started as a Sonic fan character. I didn't know about the existence of a Sonic fandom either, since at that time the internet was more precarious. The funny thing is that nowadays I know that many people did the same. They created their characters from other franchises, and with the time, they gave them own style and story. I always dreamed that Spaicy would be something big and well known, like a video game, animation, or a comic book. So back then, I promised my character that someday I will make it happen. It was going to take me years, but I will make it. After several years of drawing Spaicy, I put her on hiatus to dedicate myself to my studies and other stories, with different characters, this time humans. All those stories were drawn during my free time at school, where I was clearly not doing very well, since I was 100% focused on drawing instead of studying. I had several stories that were never published, they just stayed for me. Although, the most notable one is Element 02. This story had a lot of work, and I drew it on paper with ink and screen tones. I wanted to experience what it felt like to be a mangaka. It's a very exhausting but rewarding job that takes years to do. Back in 2009, I entered university, where I studied digital design at Universidad del Desarrollo. I was hoping that the career would teach me how to make animations or video games. Deluded. Although the career itself didn't teach me what it means to be a better artist, it did teach me discipline and deadlines. Returning to Spaicy, back in 2012, I felt nostalgic for Spaicy, and I said to myself, you know Lou, nowadays you have much more talent than you had when you were a kid. Now you know how to draw better, you know how to animate, so why you don't take Spaicy and make a story from scratch, creating a new world, new adventures, and new characters? That's when I got excited and I said, let's get to work. That's how little by little I started to create Spaicy's lore. What will be its world, its rules, its planet, its species, and more. I must say that doing all this work was overwhelming, and it was scary and lazy at the same time. But little by little, and organizing very, very well, you can structure a good map of what this whole story is. I was also lucky to have people who helped me with ideas, asked me questions about how things work, so that I could cover every corner of this new world. It was a task of years having to think about the continent of Spaicy Planet, its cities, political system, flora and fauna, the energy of the planet, and more. Over time, all this was and is still being polished. Now, in another area of Spaicy, I was very much in a 50-50 of making a comic or a video game. The truth is that the idea of a video game tempted me more, but because I have no programming skills, despite my failed attempts, I decided to go for the comic, something I could work on mostly by myself. That's how the first version of the comic started, applying my knowledge of manga, this time taken to digitally using Clip Studio Paint. Narrative was never my forte, and at first I had a hard time coming up with interesting ideas for the story. But over time, I managed to get help from people more experienced in the subject to get help with the script. The story went through many versions, some simpler variants, others too complex, and that's how I finally decided to go for something I really like. Even though it's cliché, I'm happy with it, and it's strongly inspired by the series I used to watch in my childhood. It may not be the best of stories, but it makes me happy. The comic started out being in black and white, manga style, but since my forte is not narrative, I decided to reboot it and make it look more visual, with my already more polished knowledge of colors. At the same time, back in 2018, together with Mark Moon, we decided ourselves to making a prototype of the video game, which we're still working on a little bit at a time. The idea is to make the same story of the comic, but more summarized and interactive. We are currently working on the comic, some animations, and little by little the video game. Spaicy Project went through many stages. It had its ups and downs, its learning stage, and much more. But the project and I have been growing together. Currently, what I aspire to achieve is to become what I have always admired, to create a franchise recognized and loved by people, being Spaicy Project my legacy. I also hope to be an inspiration for many people, as the great senpais were for me. My words to you will be, give it a try, you have nothing to lose. That's all for today in this short history of Spaicy Project. Thank you very much for watching this video, and don't forget to support us. Any contribution to our Patreon or purchase in our store will be more than welcome to help this project to grow even more. I'm Lulu Visit, and I wish you the best of success in your personal projects. Goodbye!